Good evening, mortals. Did you miss me? I still remember the fun I had last year, exploring some of the terror the realm of Cartoon Network had to offer. I even took the chance to revisit it more recently, and became well acquainted with another master of dark power, the Lich. And I have to say, we make quite the team. We share similar passions of torment, and we enjoy each other's company. I do hope to see him again soon. But on the side, I took advantage of the time since my return by exploring a whole new world. I mean a whole new realm for some new deep, dark, disturbing, and just beautifully terrifying elements. And this was the realm of Disney. During my time there, I've noticed plenty of mortals who tend to focus on just how pure and wholesome this realm may seem, which could sooner or later lead to some problems, like having the dark side of this realm be horribly neglected. I believe one of their own properties, The Nightmare Before Christmas, said it best.
Life's no fun without a good scare.
And naturally, I am all for that, which drove my curiosity to explore this realm in the first place. And now here I am, possessing this electronic realm to share with you my findings. And I must say, I was greatly impressed. I found plenty of Disney memories that look like they could make anyone jump out of their skin. And there's a fair chance you mortals have experienced plenty of these memories for yourselves, be it at youth or more recently. It's very likely, as some of this creepy material spans from entire decades ago. And material like this is still popping up in these modern times as well. Just learning about these for the first time, I could hear some lovely fearful screams from many as I was watching through these scenes myself, which is always a good sign in my book. So with that, I'm gonna take you down into what I've learned through the 4 levels of Disney's dark side. Enjoy, mortals, and good luck keeping your sanity in one piece during this trip. I suppose it would be natural to start this tour with one of the more common tropes you're likely to find in a story from this Disney realm. The concept of doom and demise. They can be used as a form of setup or closure for just about any story. Just look at what we got from Tarzan. Clayton has proven how vicious he can truly be, so it would be quite fitting, or maybe even poetic, that he'd end up with just as vicious a closing. Ah, yes. His fate of falling to his doom, followed by his hanging, may be enough to deliver an impression. But in case that wasn't enough, you can even see his dead body for a second, just to add on to the element. But mind you, this realm is trying to appease more toward a family crowd, which means it can't always be this bold. And that can be quite disappointing in some regards, but at least they knew how to use their boundaries as a bit of an advantage. Sure, these mortals and characters couldn't meet the fate of death all the time, but there were still plenty who got close enough to it. And that can still lead to an element of fear that I'm sure will scar them for many years to come, and can potentially leave the spectators in just an equal state of shock. Remember some of the frights Aladdin had to encounter? After being caught and knocked out by Jafar's men, this mortal was practically facing the door to his watery grave. But of course, he had the genie to spare him of this fate. Although the genie himself still managed to show us the evil he's capable of when Jafar got a hold of him. Hoo-hoo, boy! Jafar himself has shown he has what it takes to craft his own dark side. Okay, but now we're starting to get sidetracked, so moving on. So yes, there were some rather impactful scenes with this kind of element. But from what I've seen, one of the most, if not the most iconic example of this concept comes straight out of Toy Story 3. The arrival at the dump alone made a great metaphor indicating this might as well be it for Woody and his friends. There were plenty of risks they faced that could have easily done them in, but they managed to overcome them, and it all built up to the ever so memorable incinerator. It was here where the toys could feel the dread among them. They have lost their hope of surviving, and they could all tell they were gonna have to go together. But again, you know they couldn't go that far, so a happy ending was to be expected. But nevertheless, you can't deny the structure of the scene was brilliant in many ways, whether it's for the fear aspect or from an artistic standard. All this alone may be coming off powerful enough to some, but be warned, mortals, this is just the beginning. It may be hard to believe, but there are a number of shows in this Disney realm that can come off wholesome from a distance, and yet still hold some kind of dark secret from within. Whether it's from a single episode serving to play out as your average nightmare, or a character with that very same potential. For my first example, I point to Star vs. the Forces of Evil. For the longest time, Star was under the impression that her life of fighting evil would consist of nothing more than Saint Olga's brainwashing scheme, or the various attacks from Ludo and his followers. Although to be fair, Miss Heinous brainwashing her poor victims would be quite eerie enough for me to take notice. But then, along came the one they call Toffee. And he changed everything. I had the fortune to learn what I can about this being through the dark spirits of Muni, and what I found was quite fascinating. Though he started off trying to win over Ludo and be one of his minions, he later proves to be far more cunning than meets the eye. He managed to capture Marco and almost did him in. But that's not all. His real power comes into fruition at the Battle of Muni, as he's got both the power of the wands in his grasp and Ludo at his control. He's got Ludo possessed, and he banished Star to that sea of despair. It's just so fascinating seeing Ludo in such a state of insanity, and seeing Star so helpless. Oh, such a wonder! And it was all thanks to Toffee. As it turns out, his plan was to destroy the magic all across Muni, but little did anyone know that Toffee would have had the circumstances manipulated all in his favor, as Star would have been the one to carry out his deed for him in the end. It was most clever of him. Nicely done, Toffee. But unfortunately, despite his noble actions, I dare say it wasn't enough. I was craving more of the satisfaction that his chaos delivered. I wanted to see more of that fear being spread, and preferably in a more creative manner. Then I met another chaotic being who completely blew Toffee out of the water. Straight from the depths of Gravity Falls came Bill Cipher. And while Toffee has admittedly found ways to impress me, I'd still have to say it was Bill who successfully earned my praise, as he had his own series of fear to offer, and on a much greater scale than Toffee ever could. Like Toffee, Bill also had his own powers of corruption, which he's wonderfully shown through both Dipper and that future mortal Blendin. And that's just the icing on the cake. Just look at his own version of Gravity Falls, or as many have called it, Weirdmageddon. This civilization includes creatures and beings, the likes of which no mortal has ever seen before. Bubbles that reconstruct those, be it physically or mentally, just by making contact with them. And Bill himself has proven to be quite the deity, a force to be reckoned with. He can practically do whatever he wants, and it doesn't even require pulling teeth, unless he feels like that too. He's gotten away with multiple petrifications, massive destruction, and even this nifty little trick. Oh, now that's a classic. If no one else, Bill, you're the one I'm most proud to have met in this section of the realm. You and I have gotten along quite well right off the bat. And sure, I could go on and share my praises with other beings who came from Gravity Falls, Like, for example, Archibald Corduroy, the ghost of Northwest Manor. He too had some promisingly disturbing tricks up his sleeve, and a rather dark story to back himself up. But he had a more down-to-earth motive, and didn't have much reason to return when it was obtained. And even I know not where he is now. But nevertheless, Bill has shown us one of the biggest wonders within the great beyonds held by this realm. I, for one, am absolutely proud to see all he's accomplished. I hope someday to find where they've been hiding him and recover his body. He certainly deserves another chance, and must show us more that he's capable of. Someday. I'm sure just about everyone remembers some of those creepy moments crafted by sinister beings from the older movies. One of the most iconic examples many would point to is Claude Frollo, one of the greatest religious beings to witness the pits of the hellfire. Given the power of his position, he's had quite the advantage at his disposal. Houses were burned and lives were lost. He managed to spread pain and despair clear throughout Paris. And all for the girl he had feelings for. Even going as far as to make her suffer too, should she even think of turning him down. This man has gone further than any other villain with his kind of routine ever could. He's certainly done much more than even Gaston would have ever dreamed of. Already, you can see this level has quite a strong start. But this is just one of many shining examples of those bold, ruthless icons who've shown generations of youth a new layer of fear they would have probably never known otherwise. There was a plethora of exhibits to this category back in Disney's younger times. I'm sure many remember Sleepy Hollow, for example, and how poor Ichabod had to escape the wrath of the Headless Horseman, lest leaving his life right on the line. With many close calls along the way, the horseman's devotion to ending off Ichabod knows no bounds, and I find his perseverance quite commendable. There's plenty of reason to fear him on his own. As Bone Strong best explains, that could be enough to make anyone uneasy. But then seeing him in the flesh, oh boy, now that paints a completely different light. With the obviously expected, but still ominous, headless appearance, his swinging sword, his speed on a horse, and that ghoulish laugh. You're looking at an ideal design of a nightmare figure, and I love his impact, especially since he made sure there was to be no sign of Ichabod coming back afterward. And what about Pinocchio and the infamous Curse of Pleasure Island? From first impressions, it seems like the type of island that could be a nice place to get away, but only turns out to be the place to get away from. As this cursed island makes the children who were lured there suffer, as they're all turned into donkeys, which is demonstrated through a delightfully terrifying transformation with Lampwick. So such is the fate these boys had to suffer. Whether or not they deserved it before, they certainly did now. Now, Lampwick and many of the other children have to be reminded of this, as they're stuck with this burden for the rest of their misguided lives. With the potential nightmares this island and the coachman created, it certainly earned my attention, as well as grabbed the attention of millions of mortals for decades. But the literal biggest example would have to be the ultimate mascot of fear from this era. The almighty legend, Chernobog. This demon has his own land to possess at his leisure, Bald Mountain. And every night he's granted the opportunity to unleash his reign of darkness across the village below, letting him raise the dead, create monsters and other forms of life, for his own praise and worship. He could even execute them with ease, should he so desire. He's got the fate of this land quite literally at his fingertips, until he's forced to retreat by the bell's toll, weakening his powers and telling him his time is up. Oh, Chernobog, I can certainly relate to that. I too understand the pain that one's spiritual bell can send, be it physically, mentally, or emotionally. So it's more than fair to say that plenty of these beings have been deemed highly memorable by so many mortals, for their fear factor and the creativity they themselves use with it. As we ever so slowly approach the end of the line, I say we should go into where it all started, with the nightmares crafted through the iconic mascot himself, the one and only Mickey Mouse, an anthropomorphic rodent who seemed utterly innocent at the very beginning, but little did the public realize he would have to go through some highly scarring experiences for the next century. The first of these eerie installments I'd like to direct you to is Runaway Brain. What starts off looking like a standard mortal's rom-com turns into a series of shock factors immediately after, as Mickey becomes the unexpected victim of a surprise brain transplant, to which his brain gets swapped out with a monstrous Julius Pete. And while Pete's brain might not be as easily functioning as Mickey's, his natural instinct in this scenario is rather commendable, as he shows a far more menacing side to Mickey than I'm sure many would be used to seeing. And oh, what a vicious performance we got from Julius too. Such chaos, it makes me blush with excitement. Whether in his form or Mickey's, it could certainly lead to chills for many spectators. Now, I could be singing the praises of this longer, but I wouldn't go that far with it. As beautifully dark as this was, I happened to find another piece of media from this section that's both partially similar, but also goes much further with its spooky atmosphere, which I'll go more into very shortly. Even with the promising impact Runaway Brain left, it still wouldn't hold a candle to what I call the golden staple of both this part of the realm and the realm as a whole. Mickey endured so much since the start of his legacy and experienced so many eerie moments that it was surprisingly difficult to put the crowning spotlight on one particular installment. So for once, I was compassionate enough to give it a two-way tie. The spotlight truly deserves to go to these good old-fashioned shorts, The Mad Doctor and Pluto's Judgment Day. Let's start with The Mad Doctor and what he gives us. Oh, that remarkably hideous laugh he delivers. It's like music to my ears. To some it may not seem as chilling as, say, the Headless Horseman, but it's his intentions that come with it that delivers the fear I so desire. Just thinking back to him gives me the fond memories from when I first met Freaky Fred. And don't get me wrong, Fred, I still greatly admire that dark presence you gave everyone. But I must give my credit to the Mad Doctor as well. Sure, you were known for your insanity and for obsessively shaving many mortals and animals, but the Mad Doctor has just as much going for him, if not more. Like this being has a whole castle in his possession, filled with mysterious twists and turns, and even skeletons living with him who are just as willing to give Mickey a scare in their own creative way. And who could forget the Mad Doctor's goal? This being has planned to make his own chimera, and use Pluto as one of his test subjects, and potentially Mickey too. Although, the god of this realm, the Walt as I call him, seemed rather generous in this situation, and woke Mickey up from his nightmare in the end. So even though this never truly happened, I'm certain that it still filled a great number of mortals who've happened to witness this with great fear for entire generations, and I know it will continue to do so. Pluto's Judgment Day is just as likely to leave such an impression, but perhaps for other reasons. The setup alone may be enough to make some mortals feel quite uneasy, watching Pluto slide down to his doom and be shackled down, all while being eyed by vicious-looking cats all around him. And while this is also depicted solely through nightmares, this displays another side of Pluto that I'm sure many mortals would have not seen coming. There are a handful of implications giving that he may have tormented a number of cats in his life. Is this true? Is it slander? We may never know. But one thing's for sure, this was all stacked against Pluto nevertheless. And it seems he was doomed to face this fiery setup right from the start. I can practically hear the screams forming from these moments. Those wonderful, disturbing screams. So anyway, are these shorts something I'd recommend? Absolutely! As a demon wildly fascinated by fearful elements, these examples certainly grabbed my attention. And I'm sure they'll grab your attention too. And maybe even your souls. But that mostly depends on the grasp of your sanity. You may claim to have the courage to fight the disturbing material from within these trials, but I'd love to see you try. And so I say this shall conclude our tour of the horrors that can be found from the realm of Disney. But mind you, all this was just a mere sample of what's to come in this realm. It would take much longer to break into a more fair portion of what this realm has to offer. I mean, we're looking at 100 years worth of spooky, chilling memories. So perhaps we may revisit this realm another time. For now, this is just a handful of some impressive nightmares that many have seen for the last couple's decades. I gotta admit, this realm has been quite impressive with the nightmares it's crafted over the last century. And I can imagine some of the beings within this realm, even those who have yet to be discovered, will craft some new stories with wonderfully frightening elements for many years to come. And I'll be there to watch over from afar and witness in awe as they experience many different forms of fear and despair. But for now, I'll leave you mortals to whatever remains of your sanity. Have a pleasant night.